It could rain the whole time, I don't care.
I call to order the July 1st, 2025 City Council meeting. Mary, please call roll.
Richardson.
Here.
Garza.
Here.
Fast.
Here.
Magers.
Here.
Goss.
Here.
Pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have Craig from New Covenant Church here for our prayer.
Thank you. Let us pray. Almighty God, we ask your blessing and your guidance to be upon those gathered today, conducting this meeting of the Hutchinson City Council. Dear Lord, please be with our mayor and with all of the council members. May they do their work in a spirit of wisdom, of kindness, and of justice, seeking in all things that their concern is not for their will to be done, but that thy will be done. Be with those bringing business and concerns before this board this evening, that in all that is said and thought and decided, that you will be glorified. Guide all within these walls, dear Lord, to follow the example of your Son, who came to serve and not to be served. Help those in whom you have placed this authority to serve faithfully and to lift up the name of Jesus Christ in all that is said and done and accomplished. And it is in his name that we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next item.
Item number 4, we have no proclamations. Item number 5, petitions, remonstrances, and oral communications from the audience.
Thank you. I welcome anybody who would like to speak in the public comment section here to please approach the podium and state your name and address. Please limit your remarks to 5 minutes and to items not on the agenda. Audience members may address items on the agenda when the item is discussed by City Council. Is there anyone here to speak in public comment?
Hello everyone, my name is Raju Sheth and I'm with Amber Hotel and we are doing the Hutchinson Hilton Garden Inn in the Convention Center. I just wanted to just give an update. We are within 90 days of opening the hotel. Finally, my elevator is here. We still are waiting on the doors. Some of the problems we ran into is a lot of supply chain issues. Then this year the weather got very bad. Just even last week, a couple of weeks ago when we had a rainstorm, we lost $15,000 of window. They were tempered glass and it just water, that night the rain came in and the wood got soft. So one of the windows touched the ground and all the windows shattered. We are still waiting on one biggest thing is the doors, which we have paid 6 months ago. We still haven't seen them. And then one big hurdle we went into is when suddenly the tariff rules changed, and that really added a major cost to the project. I'm not here complaining about or asking anybody for money or anything, okay? So just want to let you what the hardships we have gone through on the project. But it looks like everything is looking great right now. We are right now, 4th, 3rd, and 2nd is pretty much complete, other than like putting beds and everything. But even all the things that can get nailed to the wall, the beds, all the cabinetry, everything is in, including shower doors, water running, toilets there, everything there. We are on the ground floor right now, doing the lobby and the convention center. And if anybody has any, I mean, I'm not trying to just speak here. If anybody has any questions on anything, I'm here to answer.
Raju, when do you hope to open?
Well, I'm pushing for September, but it may be October.
Okay.
It's this lot of little bitty things which we don't realize from technology perspective and everything, and we have to use Hilton vendors. We don't have a choice. And they come at their sweet time.
I have a question. Is this a situation that you may partially open, or would Hilton allow you to partially open while you wait for items to come in for other rooms, or will you have to be 100% ready to go
You have to
before
have
you open?
90% of the rooms,
Okay.
actually, sorry, 75% of the room to be guest ready. in
Guest
the
ready,
inspection.
okay.
And they take about 3-4 weeks for the openings. Like his inspection was originally scheduled July 4th, which is 6 weeks from before, after the July 4th weekend. He just pushed it. He goes, Raju, you're not ready. And I go, I know I'm not ready.
Okay.
So when he comes, I need to have my internet and everything running. The circuit has already been put in by Cox. But they do have all this other extensions running so that every room has Wi-Fi and all that. The new requirements are every room has its own hotspot. So you don't have a choke. I mean, those are all the processes. Yeah, they will not open unless you are ready to serve breakfast. Now, they will open if my old Chicago is not open, but if I can still serve breakfast from it.
I think the hope was that you'd be open before the state fair, but it sounds like there's
Well, it's 50-50.
situations out
I'm
of your
pushing it every day.
control.
3
That's
weeks ago, I thought I
understandable.
would be able to open. He's our new GM. And
Thank you, council. It's good to see a lot of familiar faces. Looking forward to opening the hotel, and it's going to be a beautiful property.
And just 10 days ago, I told him, I think we'll open. Because my doors were supposed to arrive. They are stuck in Los Angeles at the port. It arrived on June 16th, just the frames. So I thought I'll get it by June 20th. We'll have the frames ready. And then we did not want to hang the doors anyway. And the doors are now supposed to come July 20th. And I go, that gives me enough time. But my frames are still not released. Now they say they'll be released Thursday. That means no trucking is going to pick them up on Friday, July 4th. So they won't pick up till Monday, and it will take 3 days to get you. Those are the little bitty things which I realized that since COVID, things have changed so drastically. Also, people's work attitude has changed. Nobody gives a damn, to tell you the truth. Like, oh, you are 1 week delayed. I'm sorry. That's what they will tell you.
Well, thank you for
Fingers
the
crossed, though,
update.
guys. We're going to do everything we can.
And he knows that I'm there every day pretty much. They were like walking and I go, what are you doing here? I go, that's my routine time to come about. I don't come at 8 in the morning. I come at about 10:30, 11. Then I walk around. Then I go to eat at Taco Bell. Then I go home.
Do you have your employees already hired? Or
GM is hired. They will all start in the first week of August. We already have an application. We are finalizing the executive housekeeper and a marketing person. GM we hire about normally like 60 days in advance. So that way he can do some work. I mean, it's like a vacation time for him.
Let me tell you. Any questions? You can help answer.
no, that sounds great. It sounds good. Because we get asked all the time when you guys are going to open up. So
Well, original date at the Hilton was July 23rd was the opening date.
right.
And he just pushed it. You know what he did? He goes, since you're I'll just push it to December, then you tell me when you're going to open. Because that way they don't have to ask more and more papers from me in between.
Right. Right.
They come normally, their final inspection comes within about 5 weeks of opening. So we are hoping that he comes end of July, at least. And then if we speed up, they can let us open. Then they don't even come. Now they don't even come for training or anything. It's all on the phone.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for the update.
Thanks.
And we are trying our best. That's all like that. And we did, I don't know whether you guys realize, the original plan was for 100 rooms, now we have 112.
Well, good, good.
And I should thank the bank, First National Bank, Darrell Miller and them. They have been a real good partner in this thing.
All right. Thank you.
It'll be worth the wait. Thank
Yeah.
you. Is there anybody else here to speak in public comment?
Well, thank you for letting me speak today. Steve probably knows why I'm here.
Yeah.
It's something we brought up several years ago, and it's been growing, but just slowly, and we're hoping to get a little more help from the city. And I'm talking about the pickleball. It's the fastest growing sport in the United States. Rec Commission has done a lot by using the city sports arena. They're putting courts in there, which have really helped out during the daytime, but we have so many people that play at night that we're trying to find a way to help get more areas at night. I know Jason did a job over there in Rice Park, which was great. We were hoping it would get finished, but it sounds like the money's not going to be there. We play at Hutchinson. They did put 2 courts in there. The problem is, when you have 2 courts and 30-some players every night showing up to play, you don't get much playing time. We play there in the mornings also. We just know that, you know, funding is limited. And what we'd like to do is suggest a way to get more playing surface, more areas to play at, save the city money by volunteering our help to do it. And we're talking about the courts on Severance Street. City owns, I think, 2/3 of them, and what we will do is we'll volunteer the help to prepare and stripe the courts. All we ask for is the city to provide the money to buy the product with, which is probably in the neighborhood around $1,200 according to my calculation. And what we'd like to do is 6 courts. 2 and 3 tennis courts, put 4 courts on there that you require a net. We have all sorts of nets. If people want them, they can do it. Courts 7 and 8, go ahead and stripe those with the existing nets so people that do not have nets can use those. And we would, like I say, we volunteer to do that if the city would do the money. People say, well, wouldn't that interfere with the lines on the court? Keisha, the State High School Association and the National Association, they have no problem with it. They're just saying make sure it's a contrast line. They suggest orange, which is fine. We had orange tape out there several years ago, and several of the people I know play tennis didn't even notice them. We asked them about it, and they said, no, we don't see it. So we're just asking, you know, to help us expand a little better, because right now, I would say 70% of the people that we have playing with us go to Wichita. Why not try to keep them at home a little bit more? And city's always asking for people to get involved. So we will do the work. We just need the material. That's all we're asking for. So if that could be arranged some way or another, we'll gladly do it. We will do whatever it takes to actually get the courts made so we can have more places to play and more people can enjoy the game.
Can you state your name?
Don Beidler, B-E-Y-D-L-E-R.
Sorry, I'm not familiar with the courts that you're referencing on Severance Street. What
The tennis courts.
is that at Elmdale?
No,
on
it's by
7th
the-
Street. That's over
by the water park.
Water
There's-
park.
Oh, okay.
Fairgrounds.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
The
23rd,
Fairgrounds tennis courts.
basically just right south of 23rd.
Okay. Sorry, I was
Yeah,
totally
several years
drawing
ago,
a
I think
blank.
we had almost got it done, except for there was one person that disagreed, and it held it up, so it didn't get done. But,
Okay.
Well, it seems like a reasonable request.
like I say, we will volunteer to do the labor. There's no problem with that. We will do it, just all we are asking for is materials. If we can get the materials, because I can get plenty of people to help. We have all sorts of construction experience. It's just getting the materials to do it. And I priced out the materials for the 6 courts, and it would be somewhere less than $1,500, I'm pretty sure.
Paul, did you have a remark?
Okay, well, let us talk about it. We'll have to, we're in budget time right now, so
Yes, I know the budget's
Yeah.
real tight with everything, and that's the reason I'm thinking that if we can volunteer the labor, we can do it. We raised money one time for the courts over in Rice Park. I think we raised 12,000 or something, Jason. And it'd be hard to do it again when they never got finished. It'd be hard to ask people to donate money again. So, but I appreciate if you would take it into consideration.
We'll let you know. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
All right.
Zach, I got a few more games now.
You guys can call me the water boy. A while back, I made a report on city water, and I'm here today to testify to the month around that report. First of all, a cardiologist diagnosed me with 80% blockage of my right carotid artery and referred me to a specialist in Wichita for surgery at the end of the month. A little later, I was at a laundromat, and the manager was working on equipment, and he showed me a bucket of sediment. So that bothered me a little bit, so I went home, and I boiled some water, and I poured it through a coffee filter. When the water dried in the pot, it formed a powder or a dust. You could see it. And so from that point on, I stopped drinking tap water. I haven't drank tap water since then. Okay. A week afterwards, I had a serious throat infection that had been with me for a few weeks. It cleared up. The next week, the drainage in my throat that was associated with the infection decreased considerably. 2 weeks later, I went to Wichita to have surgery. The assistants did a sonogram on my throat. I met with the specialist, and he said, both of your carotid arteries are at 20%. I don't need to see you again. Now, I attribute this to many prayers from my friends, and I also attribute it to this substance that I've been consuming. So the only people I've told about this is my family. And whether they take heed or not is entirely up to them. I don't want to cause any alarm, but personally, I'm on my road to recovery because I'm not drinking this stuff anymore.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else here to speak in public comment? Can you make sure you speak into the mic, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Matthew Struble. I'm an hourly employee with the City of Hutchinson Street Department. I am a husband and a father of 4 children. I have been with the Street Department for about 4 years. Behind me are Dave Stevens, who has 6 years, Casey Ballantyne, 1 year, Justin Owens, 5 years, Adam Wooten, 25 years. We are hourly workers here on behalf of the frontline employees of Public Works Street Department. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. We are responsible for 282 miles of paved streets, 561 dirt alleys, 496,320 feet of underground storm conduit, 4,828 storm structures, 28 miles of levee system, 300 traffic poles, 1,100 traffic signals, 25 tornado sirens, and over 11,000 traffic signs. About 5 years ago, we were a department with 30 hourly positions open, and usually about 15 of those positions were regularly filled. We were a department that struggled to maintain half of the positions we had available, and we had what we called a revolving door. The average tenure had become 1 to 2 years. The morale of the division was low. Since then, there have been a multitude of changes over the past 3 years that have moved our department on a much better path. Today, we sit at right around 30 positions filled regularly, and we see a trend in tenure lasting longer. That revolving door has begun to slow down. The morale of the department is in a much better place. We are here today to extend our gratitude to the council, the mayor, the city manager, the public works director, and the street superintendent. There are still changes happening, but we are here to acknowledge the direction that we are moving. We greatly appreciate the openness and care that you have all shown in the past few years. We are here because these things usually happen in the background and go unrecognized. This is more than just pay raises, which we also appreciate, but things like transparency, being open to new ideas, and allowing the freedom to explore ideas and opportunities at every level of the city. We want to share with you that these things have been noticed, seen, appreciated, and not lost in the background. Some of us were here at the last city council meeting, and we would also like to share that we appreciate the transparency that the city council and the city manager has had to the city's citizens and employees. It's clear that even though there are current challenges, the future of the street department is a positive one for the employees and the community, and we thank you. We have some plaques that we have made for you guys. Everybody will get their own plaque. It's just a token of our appreciation.
Thank you.
Oh, Buzz. Thank you, sir.
So the plaques all have your name and title on them.
Thank you, sir.
The plaques state,
Appreciate it. Thank you.
the plaques state, on behalf of the employees of the street department, we would like to acknowledge you in the accomplishments towards making the city a better place to work. We appreciate the time and dedication you have put towards the Public Works Street Department. We thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to admit, I thought it was going to go a different direction there for a second. I was getting ready to take notes. Like, okay, here's what we got to fix.
I'll admit, I did too. I didn't know about that.
This is quite a surprise. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
I'm shocked. Very cool.
Is there anybody else here to speak in public comment? That'd be a hard one to beat, so. Sorry, let me get back to my agenda. Next item, please.
Item number 6, consent agenda.
Before I hear a motion to approve or ask for discussion, I would like to, or I motion to remove item D, which is approval of distribution of special alcohol fund awards for 2026, and move that to new business. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Richardson?
Yes.
Garza?
Yes.
Fast?
Yes.
Magers?
Yes.
Goss?
Yes. Any discussion over the consent agenda?
No, I would move to approve the consent agenda and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Richardson?
Yes.
Garza?
Yes.
Fast?
Yes.
Magers?
Yes.
Goss?
Yes.
Item number 7, there are no ordinances or resolutions. Item number 8, new business, warrants for traffic signals.
Hello, I'm Patrick Bird. I'm a traffic engineer with JEO Consulting Group. I'm going to be talking today about some of the warrant studies that we helped the city with. And so looks like my presentation's up, so I'll start moving on. I guess the one thing I wanted to start off with was just kind of explain what we do as far as deciding when a traffic signal should go in. There is what we call traffic signal warrants. Essentially, the purpose of a signal warrant is to gives us some definition to decide when a signal is necessary. And so one of the things that we have is a set of traffic signal warrants that essentially set a basis for decision makers and engineers to look at to help make those decisions. Specifically, when I speak of traffic signal warrants, they are based or included in the manual on uniform traffic control devices. This is a national standard that's published by FHWA. We just recently got a new one last year, or I guess it was 2 years ago. 2023 is the newest version of that particular document. And then one thing I really want to make clear too is in that kind of document, it pretty much says that the satisfaction of those traffic signal warrants that are stated in there doesn't necessarily mean or require that an installation of a signal control or traffic signal goes in. It's simply a guidance. So even if you do satisfy it, doesn't necessarily mean that that is the correct decision. Just to give you all kind of background on when we say traffic signal warrants, there's actually 9 of them. I've listed them here on this particular slide. They are actually included in that document over there, which is the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Many of these are not always applicable. We have warrant 1 and 2, which are pretty much based on vehicular volumes that occur at intersections, as well as the peak hour warrant. There's also a couple pedestrian warrants, which are, one actually looks at pedestrian volumes and then another looks at school crossings. We do have one called a coordinated signal system. There's a crash experience that we look at, road network, which is essentially trying to maintain, a signal could help with maintaining coordination on a signal system. And then finally, if you're near a at-grade railroad crossing. The particular studies that we did, you'll see that there's 3 highlighted there in green. Those are the ones that we actually looked at and are applicable to our studies that we did here. There is a yellow one also highlighted. That's the crash experience. That is in process because typically when we're doing this, there's not a signal there already. So you're able to look at the crash history and say, based on that crash history, you can say, should a signal be here or not? The signal's already there, so what we are doing instead is looking at the crashes before and then after. So that would be a follow-up exercise that we would do. Obviously, we can't look at the crashes until the condition of the signal not being there, if that is the decision. As mentioned, the first 3 that you see highlighted in green are the ones that are completed that I'll be going through with you on a more detailed basis. Before I get started into that, you might ask yourself what goes into these warrants or what kind of inputs that we look at. The big one is the top one there, that we look at count data. Typically, we collect 12 hours of count data during the day. You could do 24 hours, but generally overnight volumes are not very big, so it's not really worth our time to look at those particular volumes at night. We typically collect these with video camera units. That's what we did in this particular case. And mainly we're looking for turning movement counts, but more specifically, how much volume of traffic is on the main street and what we call the minor street. So the major street is the one that's going to have the more dominant volume, and the minor street is the one that has lighter volumes. And then we also count pedestrians that cross at each of the approaches. We also look at speed limit. That's an important factor, and I'll get into a little bit about that here in a moment, how that impacts our decision-making process. We also look at the number of lanes, whether there's 1 lane or 2 lanes on each of the approaches. Population of the community can come into it. For populations that are less than 10,000, it does impact the thresholds that you look at. Thresholds tend to be lower when you're in smaller communities of 10,000 or less. The other thing we sometimes do is adjust some of these volumes that we collect, depending if there's auxiliary lanes like turn lanes, left or right turn lanes. I will tell you right now, in this particular study, we did not make any reduction in volumes. We just took the volumes as they were and did not reduce them. So we've used the total volume that was collected at each of the sites that I'll be discussing today. And then, of course, there's crash history. We look at crashes and specifically what type of crashes are occurring at the location, because there's only particular crashes that can be treated by a signal. Typically, those are angle crashes. Usually, if you're at a two-way stop control intersection, angle crashes are occurring. Those can be remedied by adding a signal potentially, if that particular type of crash is occurring enough or more frequently. This particular map highlights the actual groups of intersections that have been studied to this point. You'll notice in the green, and it's probably hard to read, but we have a series. The ones in green are the groups of intersections that we studied first, and those include essentially 4th and Washington, 4th and Walnut, Avenue A, and Washington. Those were the first group of intersections that we looked at, and then we looked at what I'm calling Group 2, which is the intersections highlighted in yellow. That is 23rd and Tyler, Bigger and Maple, and then the last one is 11th and Baker. So that's pretty much kind of our study area that we're looking at. So just to give you, I'm kind of going to start off by just giving you what the results of our study were, and then we'll go into each of these warrants kind of in more depth so you can understand where they come from. In Group 1, when we look at all three warrants, Warrant 1, 2, and 4, we find that none of the intersections satisfy the thresholds that would guide you to recommending maintaining a signal at those locations. And as you see there, that's Group 1, again, 4th and Washington, 4th and Walnut, and Avenue A and Washington Street. Group 2, very similarly, all of these intersections, when we study them, none of those locations satisfied the thresholds of the MUTCD for recommending maintaining a traffic signal. So let's go and dive into each of these warrants. So I was going to start off with traffic signal warrant 1, which we tend to call the 8-hour warrant. Essentially what that warrant is we look at those 12 hours of data that we looked at, and we need to satisfy the thresholds that the MUTCD lays out for 8 hours of the day. If you do not satisfy those thresholds, and that's thresholds on both the minor street and minor street approaches and major street approaches. So if you only satisfy one, but not the other approach, you're not satisfying that hour. And then on top of that, you need to satisfy 8 hours of the day. Now, one thing to mention, it gets a little more complicated too, is that there's several conditions that we look at when we look at these 8-hour warrants. Condition A is intended for the application of these to look at a potential signal where a large volume of intersecting traffic is occurring. So it's really a large volume of the major street and minor street. And when you look at those thresholds, typically that means you have a lower major street volume threshold to satisfy and a slightly higher minor street volume threshold to satisfy. That is what we call condition A. Condition B is intended for those situations where maybe you don't have a lot of traffic on the minor street, but you have a lot of traffic on the major street, and trying to turn onto a major street is difficult from that minor street. And so in this particular situation, which is condition B, those thresholds change. So the higher major street volume threshold is actually a little bit higher than the condition A, and then the threshold for the minor street volume is actually lower. Then to make things a little more complicated, we have something called a combination A and B. Now, one thing I'll mention is when you read the language of the MUTCD, it says that The combination warrant A and B should not be looked at until you've tried all other options to try to solve any kind of issues you have at the intersection. Alternative traffic controls. This is kind of like when you've tried everything else, you still have an issue there. You can look at this warrant and see if it's satisfied. What the combination A and B warrant is it essentially looks at condition A and B, but at a lower threshold. Typically a reduction of about 20% in that threshold. The other thing to mention is there's some further reduction in those thresholds that you need to satisfy. Again, I kind of alluded to it already, but with populations less than 10,000 or on streets where speed limits are greater than 40. And that actually reduces those thresholds even further. Now you'll notice in that those previous slides, all the intersections we studied, those were 30-mile-per-hour conditions, so they're actually going to be at the higher threshold. However, as I will show here shortly, just to cover all our bases, we analyzed it for all these conditions, whether they're officially applicable here or not. And really, that's just kind of make a statement here of how close or how far away we are from actually warranting signal control at these intersections. So that same first group, traffic signal warrant 1, the group 1 results, when we look at those conditions that I highlighted, you'll see that none of those actually none of those are warranted whether we look at a speed less than 40 or greater than 40. The other thing I'll mention is I actually listed there how many hours are met. Remember, again, this one we have to satisfy 8 to say that we've satisfied this warrant. You'll see there's a lot of zeros up there. There is some when you start looking at the higher speeds where we satisfy some of them. I think 4th and Walnut is the one that probably is the closest, if you were going to say it's going to be close, to satisfying this particular signal warrant. It's, as you notice, the combination warrant actually has 9 hours that are satisfied, but just for A. For combination warrants, you have to have both A and B satisfied to say that it actually is a satisfied warrant. So really, the long and short of this is that we're very far from satisfying those warrants at any of the Group 1 locations. Group 2 is very similar, and actually even more so. The volumes are even less at these particular intersections here. You'll see a lot of zeros there of hours. The number of hours meeting those thresholds where we would consider signal control is pretty much 0 at most of them. I think 11th and Baker has a couple that show up when we look at the combination warrant. So again, we're not really even borderline on these. We're very far off from actually satisfying at least this particular warrant, traffic signal warrant 1. Moving on to traffic signal warrant 2, this is one's called a 4-hour warrant where we try to look at mainly the peak hours here. Again, we're satisfying volume thresholds. The table on your right is a table that shows if your volumes fall below that line, you're not warranting or satisfying the warrant. If it's above the line, you are satisfying the warrant. One thing I'll mention is you'll see several lines there. Those are dependent on how many lanes are on each approach. So you'll see a line there that just says 1 lane on the major street, 1 lane on the minor street, and so on and so forth as you go up. The more lanes you have, the higher those thresholds to satisfy get. Again, some of the inputs we look at here, we are looking at the volumes on major and minor streets. We do have a condition where if your speeds are greater than 40, those thresholds reduce. And I already mentioned the number of lanes, but in order to satisfy this, we have to satisfy 4 hours of the day that we looked at. So when we look at the results for Group 1, again, we looked at both speeds less than 40 and greater than 40, if we were to assume that. Again, speed limits at all these locations were 30 miles an hour. We do not satisfy any hours. None of the hours are met for warrant 2 for Group 1. Very similar to Group 2. None of the hours, not even 1 hour, was satisfied for any of the Group 2 intersections. The last warrant I'll talk about is the pedestrian warrant. Very similar. We look at vehicular volumes on the major street, and then we look at how many pedestrian crossings were occurring there. Again, very similar, if you look at the table there, if you're below the line, you're not satisfying. If you're above the line, you're satisfying the warrant. There is a little bit of different thresholds here. If you're above 35 miles an hour, those speeds reduce, or those thresholds reduce. Also, if you assume a pedestrian walk speed of less than 3.5 feet per second, those thresholds can go down as well. You might only do that if you're like near a school or maybe if you're near a hospital or something like where there might be people that have slower pace of walking. Again, this particular warrant, you must satisfy 4 hours of the day. There is another part to this. There is a peak hour warrant where you look at thresholds for just the one peak hour of the day, and you need to satisfy those thresholds for that particular hour of the day for 4 consecutive 15 minutes. So we looked at both of these scenarios. When we look at the group 1, no hours are met, whether we're above 35 or less than 35. One thing I'll also mention is we did look at whether you had assumed a slower speed for pedestrians or not. The results don't change. They don't. There's no hours that are met whether you assume a slower speed for pedestrians or a greater speed. Very similar again to group 2, no hours are met here.
Did you take into account that these 3 are all near elementary schools?
Yes, we did look at it, and there is a specific warrant for school crossings. To apply that warrant, you need to have at least 20 pedestrians in a peak hour occur. None of those locations had, they didn't have 20 in a day, to be quite honest. So we didn't go further on that particular warrant. Okay. The next step to do after you've looked at the number of crossings is to look at how many gaps are on the major street, and you would have to go out and collect data on that. But since the pedestrian volume does not satisfy that minimum threshold for that particular warrant, we did not proceed further on that warrant.
I have additional questions about that, but I'll save them to the end.
Sure. So I kind of want to close with just some of the negatives of maintaining unwarranted signals. One study that was provided by the NCHRP, the study was actually about trying to improve or reduce collisions at signalized intersections. But one of the ways of reducing crashes at signalized intersections is to remove unwarranted signals. And so with that particular data, they kind of provided some data with that, saying that before and after studies showed that you could reduce overall crashes by 24%, and injury crashes by as much as 53%. The big one too is that when you put in signals, you tend to increase inherently rear-end crashes. With their data, they show that you could reduce rear-end crashes by 29%. So a lot of the research shows that unwarranted signals actually can increase crashes if they're not warranted. One other thing I wanted to highlight is that when you put in when you maintain an unwarranted signal, you run into a lot of compliance issues too. A lot of people tend to, you'll see a lot of red light running increase. And so I will say that with our data, I did take a look at our data that we've had for the past 5 years. It's interesting to mention the intersection at Baker, half of this intersection crashes that occurred there were red light running. So that kind of falls in with this. The other thing I would like to highlight is that at many of those 4th Street intersections in Group 1, over half of the crashes are rear-end crashes. So again, it kind of falls in with this kind of pattern of what happens when you maintain unwarranted signals. Finally, the other negative of maintaining unwarranted signals is really the cost. Money that could be used elsewhere in the city. Just to give you an idea, a new signal these days costs anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000. Maintenance of those, this is from the FHWA, and again, it varies depending on what jurisdiction or city you're looking at, but maintenance costs can be anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000 per year. So if you look, typically a life cycle of a signal is on average 30 years, but sometimes you go bigger, so sometimes you can go more than that, sometimes you go less than that. But if you figure that as a 30-year endeavor, you're looking at an additional cost of $180,000 to $240,000. And this does not include knockdowns. So when somebody runs into the pole, you got to replace that pole. That's not included in that maintenance cost. And so the last thing I will say is, maintaining unwarranted signals, although I don't have any examples of actual court cases, but it could open the door to legal liability if you knowingly are maintaining an unwarranted signal and somebody could prove that a signal, the reason a crash occurred was because the signal was there. So even if they could or could not prove that, I don't think it's something that the city would like to keep, open the door for. So in short, I think, at least from the traffic engineering perspective, we recommended in our study that these signals would be removed and alternative traffic control, either two-way stop control or four-way stop control, depending on what sight distance conditions are out there. And that concludes my formal presentation.
Okay, what's your first name? Yeah, I didn't catch your first name, sir.
Patrick?
Patrick. I'm a senior traffic signal technician. I've worked for the city for 30 years. Number one, but on the warrants, did we take a study on this and how much electricity these cost us, or how many accidents we had at these intersections? Did you find out how many? You talk about rear-end accidents.
We did. We do have. I have crash data right here.
So how many accidents have we had in those signals?
Well, I can go through. At 4th and Walnut, we had 21 crashes from 2020 to 2024.
Mm-hmm.
62% of those were rear-end crashes.
Okay.
4th Avenue in Washington,
Mm-hmm.
we had 11 crashes.
Okay.
55% of those were rear-end crashes.
Okay.
How many? Sorry, back up. How many accidents total?
11.
11.
Total accidents?
You said 11. Thank you.
11, correct. Avenue A in Washington is 3 crashes. It's less, statistically speaking, saying what the percentage would be probably doesn't mean as much, but there was one crash that was a rear-end crash out of those 3. Maple Street and Bigger Street had 1 crash.
Mm-hmm.
Is that in the same time frame, 4 years?
Yeah, these are all the same time frame. That was a side swipe. 11th and Baker was the one that had 8 crashes. Half of those were red light running. And then the last one, 23rd and Tyler, I think was the one, had no crashes in the 5-year period.
The warrant part of it is because our population went down. That's why your warrants aren't going to meet. We don't have the traffic we used to have. You got to have population to have. When those lights were put in, I'm with the city for 30 years. I've seen those traffic lights with a lot of movement there. Of course, you're not going to have any good. It's not going to meet the warrants because our population has gone down. I'm real worried at 4th and Washington Street. We remove those traffic lights and the width of the street. Right down there to the north of it, we have an old age home there, and we have older drivers getting driving that. We get an older age driver, we have that stop sign backed up there. In my point of view, we're putting danger there when we remove the traffic lights. I understand what you mean by the warrants and all that stuff, because I got certified and I had to learn all the warrants and all that stuff. But the reason for the warrants is because our population went down. So when hopefully the people that were here earlier saying we're doing a good job, our city will start coming up and we'll start getting more people here. So if we take those lights out, we're going to have to go all over this thing again, go through all the warrants and all that other stuff if we choose to put lights back up there. And those lights aren't about, those lights, no difference if they're operating or if they're not operating. They're still there. And the only reason, in my opinion, as a traffic signal technician, is that we lost our population. That's why we don't have no warrants. Now, if you guys sit there and tell me it's because of electricity costs, I could say, okay, I understand that. But as far as maintenance, they got to be maintained anyway. And we have traffic signal technicians who were just up here. We got to have, when I was there, we had a traffic, we inspected our lights too, and I think they still do it. And regardless of that light's working or not working, it's still got to be maintained. So that thing about the maintain, we have to take them down, I don't buy that as a traffic signal technician. That's my opinion. And so I'm saying they're not bothering anybody. And another problem I have over there, in Washington, we have a roundabout there. Them coming off that roundabout, we're going to have big trucks coming through there. Now that traffic light, or that stop sign is going to have to maintain those trucks or whatever's coming off 4th and Washington, coming towards, going to the, was that going to the east? Going to the east. I worry about that. And that's my opinion. It doesn't matter if they're there or not. They're going to cost us the same amount of money. To me, we're not going to save any money. That's my point of view. You just might as well just leave them alone. And you can go ahead, they're a semi-actuation. The lights are work on time base. Just go ahead and put them at semi-actuation. Put a camera up there. They won't run when no cars are there. They'll sit there and they're green on the A Street. They'll sit there and dwell. And they won't be moving. They won't be doing anything. Not only that, you're going to take the pedestrian crosswalks away. You're going to have pedestrians, older people trying to cross A Street with no traffic light. They're going to have to cross on their own. To me, that's a danger. The same way with the long arm, 50-foot arms, you're creating more problems to me as we get to an aging city. And not only that, the last time I was in traffic school, when you start removing traffic lights, that's a sign of a city that's going on its way out. The people look at that. What's happening to us? We're losing our lights. I don't want that as a city council. And that's my opinion. And it's a danger you start taking them out. Now, your semi-actuated lights, like your Baker and your Group 2, Group 2 is different. Group 2, they're closer. We might take a look at Group 2 because they're a closer street. They're closer streets where they're at. I can understand taking some of them out. But the ones that are bigger arms, 40-foot arms and stuff like that, you know that as a traffic signal technician. You know how much it costs to take those lights out. You got those 2-foot poles in the ground. That's going to take us some money to even take them out. So in my opinion, we need to keep the Group 1 in and maybe start looking at Group 2. And Group 1, we semi-actuate them. We put cameras in there. We stop those lights from functioning all the time, and we let the traffic handle them when they need them. When they come off that roundabout at 4th and Washington, they have semi-actuation. Boom, the light goes on, green goes across. And also would have to go ahead and put push buttons there because the lights, now they're working semi-actuated. And the old people that goes across the street would now have to push the button across the street. But they will still have that protection. They won't have to worry about stops trying to look both ways to get across the street. So my idea, when I'm thinking, you leave Group 1 alone, and Group 2, we take a different look at it. And that's just my point of view.
I guess, yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I guess I just respectfully disagree with some of the things you said. One thing I would say is there is a cost difference. If we're removing a signal and we're only having to maintain a stop sign, that is a significant cost between maintaining a stop sign and striping and a signal that is, for the life of that, you have to eventually replace it. You have to take care of knockdowns. I'm not talking even about power, actually. I wasn't even talking about power. There's the maintenance costs that I mentioned. So I really think that there is a long-term cost savings as far as that's concerned.
Well, I agree with you, but I'm talking
Steve,
safety more.
the power, one of the recent articles was that the last one that we voted to or agreed to take out, the power per year was like $1,500. So the power cost is negligible. I don't think that's anybody saying we're going to save money, so we should take out all these lights. You bring a really interesting perspective because you do have such a wealth of knowledge in this department.
I mean, to me, when I went to traffic school, you're supposed to protect lives. These things that you say, whether it be a stop sign, whether it be a traffic light, you're supposed to protect life and make it better for people to get across the street. Look how wide your street is. And the older people have to cross that street?
I guess one thing I would say, at the locations you're talking about, the signals are spaced on a block-by-block basis. So if you were to walk or cross, you have a choice, and you don't have to divert your route that far. Just example, at Washington and 4th, there's, on either side of it, there's going to be a signal you could choose to actually cross still. So the removal of that signal will not impact the safety of people crossing the street. They have options to go to the signal either to the east or to the west.
Right, 4th
which
and
are-
Washington is 1 block east, 1 block west, and you have a, let me walk down there on Google Maps.
I mean,
You have a
that's
push
probably
button.
300 feet. I mean, a typical block is
There
about
is no
300.
push button at 4th and Adams. I mean, if it feels like adding a push button crosswalk at 4th and Washington would be throwing good money after bad. If we're going to add one, I feel like 4th and Adams would perhaps be the one that you would add a push button cross.
Streets, you'd have to add one of both of them.
There is a
Yeah.
crosswalk signal, but I don't see the button on the posts.
One thing to mention, I don't know for sure, and maybe you can clarify this. Sometimes there's not buttons because if there's heads, it may be on pedestrian recall. So that's possible, and that's typical in a more centralized business district area. A lot of downtown areas will put them on recall because they know there's more pedestrians down there. So they don't
Right.
have to have an activation, but I'm not totally sure whether the case you identified is that case. I was just throwing that particular idea out there.
So my question is so 2 of these, 4th and Walnut and 4th and Washington, we've already agreed to remove those. They've been bagged and they're coming out in September, right? A in Washington, we did not have a presentation on last time when we heard presentation on these 2. Is that correct?
You don't have
I think it was
4th and Walnut.
4th and Walnut.
Okay. So is the goal or the purpose of this presentation to justify the removal of the 2 that we've already agreed upon and to recommend the removal of the others then?
Well, my understanding was the line of sight at 4th and Walnut was an issue, and that's why we weren't going to remove it.
Yes. The old Rainbow Bakery
Yes.
is right there. So the line of sight for that one is very, putting a stop sign there, people would be nosing clear into the middle of the intersection. So we felt line of sight on that one was unsafe. Even if we did, we would have to do a 4-way stop. And we felt 4th Street we didn't feel traffic would be able to flow good on 4th Street with a 4-way stop. So that's why we chose to leave the signal of that intersection. This presentation was actually just more because we've had some phone calls, people wanting to know how we came about our findings. So we wanted to get here with JEO to come up and show everybody what an actual traffic study looks like, instead of them calling down to or talking to our staff and then somebody thinking they're just taking our word for it. We wanted to show them that some engineering went into this study, and we are following the letter of the law on where we come up with this data. And we are just looking for ways that we can save some money for the long term. I mean, I understand what Steve says. Traffic lights definitely serve a purpose, and we have a lot more that we need. These are just some of the ones from people calling in and asking us about them and everything else. This is why we kind of started choosing some. There was no particular order or method to why exactly. We actually did a traffic study warrant, kind of a minor without going the full bore on all of our traffic lights a couple of years ago. These were one of the ones that stood out with some traffic counts as a good possibility. We didn't know for sure until after the traffic study was done whether it would even be something to remove.
So for this evening, the purpose of this evening's presentation, there is no action being requested of council?
No
Okay,
action from
thank you.
council. This is just a presentation to
Okay.
why.
So,
That's what I don't understand. I don't remember any action took.
right, so essentially, they've been, because we bagged those 2 lights.
That's the process.
I know, but let me finish. Because we bagged those 2 lights,
Mm-hmm.
people are up in arms and calling the city,
Right.
as well as going crazy on social media. I didn't ask for this presentation, by the way. However, I think it is good and it is timely to have this conversation because, and I'll finish that part in a minute, but that's why this presentation is reactive to people calling and wanting information about
Okay.
Why did we do that? What was the justification, et cetera. So I think this is timely because the 3 that are in group 2 are around 3 elementary schools. And we have agreed that we're putting up school zone flashers at these throughout the next couple of years. Looking at 11th and Baker, I'll just go through my notes here. That's next to Lincoln McCandless Elementary. But the boundary for that elementary school doesn't cross 11th Street, so you're not going to see the majority of your traffic going to that school crossing from 11th Street. I think that if we were being asked to vote on this tonight, I think that one would make sense to keep 11th as going through and put a stop sign on Baker. Bigger and Maple is next to Lincoln Elementary School, which is now being used only for pre-K children. I'm not trying to question your data, but when you said there were only 20 crossings on the street, the staff parking lot is on the north side of Maple and the main entrance is on the south side. So just looking at a picture of that parking lot, it feels like there would be a lot more than 20, and that's only accounting for staff. I think the drop-off goes through the back of the building for the most part. I think that one seems logical that we would consider taking it out in the near future after a school zone flasher is installed. 23rd and Tyler, that one's always seemed weird to me. It's in the middle of a residential neighborhood, and when you come to it, honestly, I probably run it more often than I stop at it. I hope the HPD's not listening, because it's weird that it's right there in the middle of a residential area, and it just always catches me off guard. The one at 27th and Adams also feels like it's unwarranted. Again, if we're removing traffic signals next to elementary schools, I would want us to not do that until we have flashers installed at every single one of these elementary schools. The last bullet point on there opens us up to liability, and that feels like the natural trade-off on that.
Back in the 1970s, Mayor, we had a program. We put all traffic lights. I put those traffic lights in back in the 70s. I worked for a contractor back in the 70s, and we put those traffic lights in at all those schools. And now they had a grant they gave us, and we put all those lights in. And I agree with you. Those groups you're talking about was group 2. That's what I'm saying.
Group 2, yes.
We gotta look at group 2.
Yeah. And the district does a study every year, every other year, that tells us how our kids arriving to school, and the majority, like the 90% range, are arriving by private vehicle.
Yes.
So kids aren't walking to school these
Yes,
days.
that's
Don't
right.
think that's coming back anytime soon. They're not riding bikes and they're not walking. So, I mean, the flashing school zone signs are essentially to stop traffic for the parents who are parking a block away and walking their kids over. But kids are being dropped off. They're not walking 8 blocks to school like they used to. So I think that this presentation was very timely, considering that we do have the additional school zones that are flashers that are being installed.
Well, I thought we only agreed to a couple flashers as an experiment. We're doing every school?
Not in 1 year. We're doing 3 this year, and then 3 are being done in the year after.
Oh, I don't remember it like that, but okay. Is this something USD 308 is requesting? Are they helping us?
Yes, we had a
fund these?
presentation from Lane Hammond from HPD.
Well, that
And letters of support from USD 308 principals and superintendent as well.
Okay. I guess I didn't see those letters. And
Was there any further questions regarding my presentation?
I would suggest if we're going to put all these new lights up, maybe we should leave the lights that are there, the traffic signals. But I realize this may not be the time to discuss that, but I'm just trying to
The flashing
figure out what our
signals-
plan is around
Yeah.
schools and around, because I don't want kids to be unsafe. And if we have lights there already that are being used or aren't being
The
used.
flashing signals we're talking about are considerably cheaper.
Okay.
They are about 6,000 a set, and they're solar powered. Their maintenance cost really becomes pretty much batteries,
Okay.
maybe every 2 years. So versus the 6,000 a year in maintenance cost on a traffic signal, and then the potential for replacing them at that 300 to 500,000. These are considerably cheaper what we're talking about for the school zone. So.
And they have a button on them
No,
that stops traffic?
No, these just flash during the time periods before and after school.
Okay,
So they're an advance warning of a crosswalk area, but they're not like an ad hoc crossing.
okay. Two completely different things than we're talking about.
Yes.
Right.
Okay,
I guess one other thing I would suggest is that, if pedestrian crossing in the school area is a concern, you could go to a four-way stop instead of a two-way stop, and make sure that you have a controlled crossing for all approaches. So, again, that's an option as well.
okay.
Can you show the group 2 intersections again, please?
Those are the group 2 ones.
That group too, you're gonna have a cost taking them out. You're gonna put one pole up, I would imagine on each opposite gun, they're programmable controllers. You program and you tell them what time you want them to come on. You program and tell them what time you want them to go off. The solar power, the batteries charge the system up. All the solar does is charge the batteries, and the batteries actually run the light. So there's still gonna be a little cost of taking them down. But I agree with you. They're semi-actuated lights. They go when the cars go. They sit there and they stay red. And when the cars come to it, then they actuate, and then they will turn green and let the cars go by. But he's right. There's not that much traffic there to anyway. I would like that group there is a problem that I would if we're going to take some out. That group there, I would agree with.
Yeah.
So, but you're still going to have the cost. Those are big poles too. So.
Is there anyone here in the public that would like to speak to this item?
Mayor, I have a few things.
Yes, please.
So we've discussed traffic signals a few times in the council meeting now. And in the previous meetings, we did share here are the ones that we're looking at. And we did express that they didn't meet warrants, but we didn't really go into detail on what that meant. And so we kind of knew behind the scenes, like the work that went into it, we as in staff. And once it became controversial, that, hey, why is the city doing this? That's when it was like, okay, we should probably explain more of what goes into it, that there's a lot more analysis into it instead of just the city picking and choosing which ones go. So that was also some of the trigger for this. And, you know, as we look at further ones, it probably would be helpful too that we consider providing more education to the public on what we're doing. So it was a little bit of we were learning as we were going on what information is helpful for the public. So that's also some of the philosophy behind this presentation.
So my understanding was that after the lights were bagged, we are now entering like a public comment period where people were encouraged to reach out to council or to staff to express their feelings about traffic signals. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I mean, there's nothing to stop us from just keeping them.
Right. So, right. That's why they're bagged instead of
Yeah.
taken out on that day one. So what is the public sentiment in regards to should we or should we not? Cecil, do you have a tally on a sticky note or something trackable?
Actually, I've only got one phone call in the negative, and probably honestly 15 or 20 in the positive
Okay.
for the ones we've already bagged. And that's just the ones that have come directly to me. I'll be honest, I avoid Facebook. I haven't looked into what's going on out
Bless your
on
heart.
there. But the direct calls to me and to Public Works has been one in the negative, and like I said, about 15 or so in the positive. A lot of people feel that they can actually get through there quicker. Their day seems to go smoother. So that's kind of where we're at. And then I had one that was completely off the topic all. Gentleman wanted me to see if I could, just turn everything where it would be flashing yellow at all times, and I kind of just blew his conversation off. So, but that's pretty much the gist of what we
I
got.
think he called me after he called you.
I've had 3 calls, both in support of trying to work smarter and save money, more so than the lights. And we talked it through, and I knew that, there was some science behind this. We weren't just randomly taking lights out, so, and
There's a book that I gave Mr. Villegas called
Death by a Traffic Engineer.
Yeah, no offense.
strong towns.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I did not read the whole book, but I encourage everybody to go read it. But what I did read, there's a lot of this that people put up signals next to schools, in particular, to kind of give people that feeling of safety, when in actuality what it does is it increases wrecks of a particular type, or it encourages people to, speed up and beat the yellow, run the red light, and have more accidents as well, as we see from the numbers on a previous slide. So fascinating data. I think that you hit the nail on the head. You did the job for me. So thank you for your presentation tonight.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Grass ordinance and mowing responsibilities.
And as a point of order, before we go into the budget discussion, I would like to have the distribution of special alcohol funds as item C. And we'll move item C to item D. That way we end on a high note.
Great. Good evening, Council. Matt Williams, Director of Community Development. I'm here tonight to give kind of an overview about how the city handles grass. This was based on a request from the last council meeting. So feel free to ask questions as we go through. I'll make this fairly quick. So the first thing is, why do we regulate grass height in the city? There are a few different reasons that the code specifically calls out, but number one, health and safety. Tall grass attracts pests. Different rodents can be in there, and it can be a nuisance to your neighbors. It can also be a fire hazard during dry months if you have a lot of long, tall, dry grass. Aesthetics, we want to maintain curb appeal and neighborhood standards, helping to avoid a decline in property values. And then, again, community standards, promoting kind of a shared responsibility and civic pride within the community. Hutchinson's ordinance is that grass and weeds must be under 12 inches. This applies to all different property types. And how we handle this is either we get a complaint or we proactively notice this, one of our code compliance officers, and they will send a notice to the property owner saying, hey, you've got grass over 12 inches. This is the line in the code that talks about this. And it gives them 10 days to correct that, get the grass mowed. If they don't correct that, the code compliance officer goes out again, checks the grass, and then we'll send it to our abatement service, somebody who will go out and mow it for them. If that happens, we assess the cost to the owner. So why 12 inches? This is kind of a balance of what's practical and what's a nuisance. Anything less than that, we feel it's probably hard to keep a good eye on. And more than that, we feel is a nuisance that attracts the different rodents and stuff. Regionally, this is very in line with what other communities are doing. You can see up there, Wichita and Salina also do 12 inches, and Derby and McPherson do a little bit less at 10 and 8 inches. Now, when it comes to the city, there's a lot of city ground that's mowed and maintained by staff. You can see up here kind of some of the different types of areas that we mow. So parks, the irrigated turf, we mow that every 4 to 7 days. parks, the non-irrigated turf, that's every 10 to 14. And then the right-of-way, I'm thinking along 61, some of the right-of-way spaces that have grass installed in them, that's every 15 to 21 days. Then we also have a lot of drainage ditches. So we've got over 50 miles of drainage ditches in the city, 30 miles of levees. We also maintain parts of Cow Creek and other flood control structures. Those are all mowed twice annually, usually once in the late spring, early summer, and then once in the late summer, early fall.
Hey, I got a question for you. I have the
Yep.
picture up. On that levee system, how far back do we mow on both sides? Do we mow off the sides?
I do
like-
not know that. We have Justin Combs and Cecil Weeble here today, so they can answer those
Okay.
specific
Perfect.
questions. I'll let them come up here in a second. Challenges with the city property is, like I said, I mean, we've got almost 100 miles of levees and ditches that we're mowing. Some of the ditches are low lying. You can see in this photo they hold water, so you have to wait to mow. Some of those are really steep, hard to get mowers down in there. We've got drainage priorities, mowing cycles. They must be balanced across the whole city. We've got staffing and equipment limitations. So we've got staff that mows this stuff, but they're not needed all year for mowing, obviously. Just a very large city workload. So we feel like the schedule that we've set up works the best for maintaining everything in the city. And then I did also want to touch on stormwater and curb cleanliness. So I'm talking about gutters and curb and gutter in front of people's property. So why this matters is that grass clipping, leaves, trash, they can clog up the storm drains. This increases flooding risks and maintenance costs. The city does street sweep in areas with curb and gutter. We try to get everywhere once a year. And, you know, we maintain our other major stormwater stuff. We do ask that residents avoid blowing their grass clippings into the curb and gutter and then help keep these inlets and curbs cleared. But that's what I've got for you tonight. So I'm happy to answer any questions, or we can have Justin and Cecil come up to answer specific questions.
Yeah, I have in regards to enforcement, like the curb and gutter, and I recognize there's two people on the city council that have mowing businesses. I saw Scott taking notes about McPherson being only 8 inches. I've been thinking a lot about enforcement, and there's so many things that we have going on that people just aren't aware of, and I'm kind of in a educate, warn, enforce type mentality. But like with our structural aspects, when we're looking at buildings that need to be handled, we're concentrating more on the commercial side first, and then that way people are aware of how the process works and then moving eventually more into residential. And I'm sure there's going to be overlap. I kind of view this the same way, because I saw a commercial mowing business where they were blowing the stuff into the stormwater drain like it was a place for the clippings to go the other day, and I took note of that, and no, it wasn't one of the two guys on city council, because I would have called them direct and said, you better get this figured out, because it's going to be awkward. But I look at that and I think, okay, so do we take a heavier hand on commercial properties and commercial mowing businesses that aren't following the rules first? And kind of and this is kind of a question for the council here, if we're guiding enforcement, would we request, hey, if you see commercial mowing businesses breaking the rules, go after them first so that people see it and it's setting an example for individual residences, as opposed to, and this happens all the time, I'm sure, in other aspects of code enforcement. Why are you going after me when the person down the road is doing it much, much worse than I am?
Right.
You know, I've got a car parked in the grass, they have a semi-truck parked in their yard kind of aspect. So I think it's important that we help guide what we think is going to be the best implementation into our community in the whole educate, warn, enforce aspect.
I think that does make a lot of sense.
I agree. I think that the people making money on the property are and should be held to a higher standard than residents per se. So commercial properties, of course, they should have, they should always be in compliance and not blowing into the street or into the storm gutters, storm drains. I think that the challenging part is that they both have the same mechanism for enforcement, which is they go through the exact same process of complaint comes in, we go do an inspection, we take pictures, we send a certified letter. That gives them 30 days to come into compliance, and then we go do another inspection. By then, a third of the mowing season is over. And that doesn't take into account that it takes a couple days to do the inspection. Sometimes there's, communication, and we give them a extension. So, should we change the mechanism of enforcement for commercial properties versus residential properties? Should company XYZ be held to a shorter standard than a resident, for instance, and have a shorter period, because we can change the period of time for compliance also. We can give them 15 days instead of 30 days. Would that create a challenge for staff? Like, I'm just spitballing here, but
Newton has, I believe it's Newton has different rules for developed residential, commercial, and industrial zoned areas. It's 6 inches. Undeveloped residential's is 8. Undeveloped commercial and industrial zoned is 12, and then unplatted property and ag zone property is 18, unless it's a crop.
I think that's
But again, back to if it's too difficult to enforce, then it's too difficult to follow the rules as well.
I'm looking at this from 2 different directions. So commercial, we try and do our best to not keep, not to get the grass in the curb and gutter, which, sometimes we fail at that. It's happened. However, I don't feel like that you should implement a code against a commercial versus a residential, because I think they should be just as liable as a commercial guy, just for the fact as they're still blowing into the street just like we are. We're trying to do our best to keep it out, but it comes in like the pesticide side of like commercial and residential. So a residential customer can go put as many pounds of barricade or whatever on their lawn or chemicals, when we have to abide by a label rate being a commercial person. So, and so I see that sometimes as like, we shouldn't give the leniency to the homeowner, because sometimes we're trying to do it the right way, and when we try and give them a little bit of leniency, sometimes that, I think, hurts our environment anyway. So I don't think we should probably go on the side of giving the residential any more lenience of, blowing the grass and leaves and all that stuff in the curb and gutter.
Well, I think there'd be a way to draft if there's a change to the ordinance, I think there'd be a way to draft it that there are things that apply to both. That the blowing of the grass clippings into the street and into the storm drains is definitely one that I would not be willing to back down on, either for commercial or for residential. Height differences is a different story.
Agreed.
There are empty or vacant lots in the middle of town that are for sale that are absolutely nowhere near 12 inches. They are far above before they ever get touched. And they're being held to the same standard as I am, and my lawn is mowed every single week. So,
no, and I'm not talking about height. I'm talking about the actual enforcement on the actual, because you were talking about getting stuff like in the curb and gutter. You see, somebody blowing it in there. The height I'm fine with. I think it should be held a little bit.
Maybe the rules stay the same. It may be an education campaign that focuses more on, we're going to start enforcing it more on the commercial side, a heavier hand on commercial than residential. The rules are the same.
Correct.
But then we get into, and this is getting more into, I don't know, nuance. Yeah, right. But what it comes down to, so a lot of there's an attitude about some of this too. I mean, there's a lot of attitude in regards to, this time of year especially. I pay my taxes. I need the street sweeper to come down my street every week. I pay my taxes, rather than I need to have a little bit more self-discipline as a taxpayer to help keep the tax costs down, so that if I take care of my curb and gutter, the community as a whole doesn't have to take care of my burden. I'm self-disciplined enough.
I'm not flooding my neighbor's yard or basement because I intentionally blow stuff into the storm drain.
But that goes into a lot of other aspects too, in regards to us as a community and trying to take care of the stuff we're responsible for, rather than saying, I pay my taxes, they should take care of me. And that we can get into a lot of stuff like that. But, we talked about that one point in time about putting your grocery cart away to keep the cost down at the grocery store. I mean, it sounds funny, but if they don't have to hire people to put your grocery cart away, then they keep their costs down. It's kind of the same idea. If you have enough self-discipline to take care of what you're supposed to take care of with code, then it's not a burden on the overall community, and it keeps us from having to, take care of it for you, which is just a cost of time and money. But that's more of an attitude issue, but it can be seen in curb and gutter. It can be seen in all sorts of aspects.
I also don't want an attitude to be portrayed that we're all of a sudden now we're picking on somebody trying to operate a business. We're making it harder for them to operate a business. I just see there's a lot of subjectivity, and if there's one or two blades of grass in the curb versus somebody mowing.
No, what I saw would be the equivalent of Greg Fast with a broom pushing the clippings into the storm drain.
Oh my gosh!
As
no.
a commercial grass mowing company.
To be clear, you didn't see Greg Fast.
I did not.
He
No,
has guys for that.
you do that at night. No, but when you see something like that as a blatant, someone should know better situation. To me, that would have been an automatic. Hey, this is beyond.
Yeah, you can't
did
do
you
that.
know? This is more of a. You operate a business doing this. You do know better.
But if we lower, I mean, like, let's go back to the height. If we lower the height of the actual grass, is that going to make anybody comply any better? Because, I mean, you go around town, there's places where it's 2 foot tall when it should have been taken care of at 12 inch. I mean,
And it's a balance too. I think 12 is somewhat standard in most areas of the state, but you also get seasons where it's drier, and it may take you 4 weeks to grow 12 inches of grass in your yard, and then you get stuff like this last month where it's every week and a half.
and I'm talking more commercial side than residential, because, I mean, sometimes I don't mind the 12 inches on the commercial side, but I'm wondering the residential side, but on the commercial side, I wonder if it shouldn't come down a little bit to maybe make it easier to enforce. I don't know.
And maybe it's not the actual property itself, but more of the overall zoning aspect in planning and zoning, if it's industrial, commercial, residential property.
Depends on your zoning.
I wonder if we lowered the height of the grass, if that would trigger the letter quicker so that maybe we would have less.
Coming from the lawn guy, that feels really self-serving.
Well, okay.
I was gonna say, I'm waiting to see how you guys handle this.
I abstain from this conversation, but I mean, I'm just trying to think through because, I get complaints all the time. Hey, city, what are you doing about this guy? My neighbor has grass this tall, and I have to explain. We have to send a letter. We have to wait. Once we get the first time mowed, then we don't have to do all of that, and it can be taken care of regularly. But it might be May before we get that whole system.
And you're gonna get strong opinions on both sides of the topic.
Coming from the
exactly.
commercial guys, though, I don't want to go cut 12 to 24 inch tall grass.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, that's the last thing we want to do is
No,
go
we
mess with
don't
something
do
like
that.
that. So,
Right.
actually, lowering it would be fine. Because most of those are the ones you look at and go, yeah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to mow 24 inches of grass.
I think one thing to point out for tall grass and weeds is we've got 2 code enforcement inspectors that drive around the town. And, I mean, you could spend your whole day just driving a couple blocks, writing down address after address. Then they have to go back in 10 days to make sure it's still tall. Then we have one person that has to manually, get all the letters ready, send all the letters. It is a lot of time and effort to send these letters. I would say sticking with 12 inches, that's pretty standard. It's easy to tell, is it taller than a foot? And getting, we send these letters. If they don't mow it, then we mow it ourselves. We send them the bill. I asked today, what's the percentage of people that actually pay the bill? She said between 5 and 10%. So the rest ends up going on their taxes. And if we see it the first time we send the letter, then we have to mow it. If we go back again for the rest of the season and it hasn't been mowed, we just immediately send it to the abatement to get it mowed.
Right, because that first letter begins a 12-month calendar.
Yes.
That we no longer have to go out and then send another letter and wait. It's
Right.
simply a reinspection, and we can reinspect as often as we want.
So if we had a letter go out today, it's good until June 30th of '26?
Yes, technically. It would have to be triggered Well, I mean, next season, it wouldn't have to be triggered by another complaint. It would be triggered by another drive-by inspection. Drive-by.
I'm not sure exactly about that. I know we would do a calendar year. I'm not sure if we would go into the next year.
Well, I appreciate the conversation, especially since we're talking about blighted buildings and all of this stuff is kind of the theme of the five of us over the last year. So
It's important for why are the rules in place, and to understand how it impacts us, not just solely we just don't like long grass. There's
Right.
reasons for it.
No,
Logical reasons.
Great discussion.
Is there any, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, so I think that, number one, I would like to hear more from staff, maybe not tonight, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but would we be stretching ourselves too thin by adopting a new code? Obviously, we wouldn't do it for this mowing season, but would we be stretching ourselves too thin? We just brought on a second code enforcement person, so is that person already drowning in work is my real question. Or would we be able to take on a code change that would increase the workload of our staff?
And the code change you're talking about is maybe a lower, like 8 inches or something?
Or if there were a change per zoning.
Oh, yeah.
So if it were 8 inches, like he read,
I think it
8
was,
inches
I think it was
commercial and.
Just thinking off of the top of my head, that becomes complicated because you can't just go
Right.
around and see it's 12 inches. Now you have to figure out what the
Right.
zoning is to figure out. If you can
Everybody
do
the
it.
same seems a lot easier to enforce and to spot check.
That's what I was
Sure.
going to ask. What can we do to make it easier for you guys out there in the field?
What if we
doing
made
your
it to
job?
where commercial and industrial doesn't require a letter?
Doesn't
State
require
law,
what?
we can't abate unless we send a letter. There's a 10-day period and
How
a
long does the letter
requirement.
last for?
There's a requirement to notify.
Dang state rules.
The law is 10 days minimum, isn't it?
Not necessarily. What you're talking about is due process, notice and opportunity to be heard. And also, while I'm at it, council, you're talking about two different things here. Tall grass complaints, and there's citations for that. But what's going into our stormwater drains, that's a stormwater violation, and we have violations not just for grass, but for many, many things that people put into the stormwater drains. Those are two separate things, and we've got separate violations and
fair.
separate fines for
That's
those.
true. We kind of just went from grass thinking about grass and stormwater drains, but there's other aspects. And also the grass in the roadway, it impedes vehicular safety as well for those on two-wheelers, which happens sometimes too.
I have another question. Are we still doing mosquito discs in our ditches around town? I was asked that on Saturday, and I told them I would get an answer, so.
That's really not germane, but I'll allow it.
It has to do with grass and water standing in ditches that need to be mowed.
So, yes, we have those. I believe we have some of those. Justin, do you still have some at the parks that people could get at one point if they want to do it themselves? Or? I don't think so. Okay.
County does.
When our staff sees it and it's been stagnant water, we do. We won't put it into running water. It serves no purpose and a waste material. So if the water is currently flowing through the ditch, we will not.
Okay.
But the stagnant areas, when they see it and we find it, yes, we typically do those.
Okay. I might have them utilize the C-click fix or something. Thank you. And thank you for allowing my indulgence.
Hey, Steve,
Mayor.
can I jump on the mosquito bandwagon?
yeah,
too?
sure.
Just one question, because I was going to call him back up anyway. So we used to spray, and I've had this question by a ton of people. We don't do that anymore, correct?
No.
And the reason for that is?
I honestly don't know. That was 15 years ago.
I know the answer. It doesn't work.
Okay. I've just had several people asking, so I
It
just
doesn't
wanted
work.
to throw it out there.
Unless you're
So-
going to aerial spray over the entire city, it doesn't work. Because when you drive down the street, like we do for parks at the golf course, you have to be able to reach all of it. When you drive down our city streets, it only reaches the front yards. It does nothing for the back.
But what if it makes people feel better?
What if it makes people feel better, Paul?
We can make you feel better for a whole lot less.
Okay.
One last comment that I have, I'd hate to change it for commercial because in my head, of course, my head's a little different than everybody else. I can see our two council members, the people we calling in like Marty Fife. Citizens arrest, you put it in, yeah.
Hey, just so you know, Steve, we made it on social media a few weeks ago for blowing grass in the street.
Oh, okay. All
So
right.
yeah, it was not a good thing, and I was not amused when it happened. So
Okay.
my guys know they're not supposed to do that,
Okay.
and so it's so yeah.
So it's already happened.
Well,
It's happened.
since it's confession time 25 years ago, I got a letter from the city with pictures of my crew not blowing up onto the yard, blowing out into the street. 25 years ago, they were enforcing this. And we don't do that anymore, but it happens.
Yeah.
My pet peeve is that you guys don't wear high-vis vests when you're edging and you're standing in the street, but that's neither here nor there. Any final remarks
A
for
lot of my
Mr.
guys
Williams?
do, but anyway.
I do not.
Thank you for putting that together.
Thank you.
Is there anybody in the public who would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, next item, please.
Approval of distribution of special alcohol fund awards for 2026.
Okay, so the reason I asked this to be taken out of the consent agenda is, well, a number of reasons. The first is just the sheer amount of funds that we have in this fund. So the $367,000 that is left over, or not left over, but that remains in the fund right now, that is the amount that is eligible to be distributed to the applicants who meet the criteria. Also, I pulled the state statute that says that the monies in such special fund shall be under the direction and control of the governing body of the city, so we can do whatever we want with those funds.
No.
I know, within reason. So, my proposal, I spoke to two of the 4 applicants today, and it seems like I don't know, is it safe to call this a grant?
Awards.
Awards, okay. So it seems like the awards are, for the most part, just a wash, rinse, and repeat from these organizations, and that they're really just asking for the same things that they've asked in the past. There is no recommendation in the application process that tells them specifically how much funding is available or what would be an appropriate ask, which isn't unheard of in grant type of applications. So my recommendation would be that we double the awards to each of these 4. That makes the total $84,000. It leaves $199,000 in the fund, which is still almost double what we've carried over year after year. I would also like to take this opportunity to highlight the fact that we had $367,000 of funds available, and only 4 organizations applied for funding. So there are numerous other organizations in town that are still eligible for these funds. This is not a one-time distribution. So if anybody is out there listening right now and you provide a service or are an organization that falls into this criteria or have projects that would fall into this category, I encourage you to apply for funds. We can still award funds later in the year. Are there any questions or remarks from council about this item?
Why is there so much money in this account? Why aren't, if it's prescribed money that is spent in a very narrow lane, why do we keep a balance?
It has to do with how much alcohol is consumed, and it varies over the years.
So we're consuming alcohol at a rate higher than the need is for this.
A much, much higher rate.
No, anecdotally, it would mean that over the past 12 months, more alcohol was consumed, more sales tax was taken in on alcohol in the past 12 months.
So what else
period.
can you use
No,
this
I
funding for?
understand that,
Yeah,
but,
it-
but it's, we always have this balance.
We do, and it is not, we are not required to carry a balance at all. We could zero out this fund every single year. So in talking to, I spoke with Boys and Girls Club and Rise Up Reno today. And I learned that federal and state grants are drying up or being put on hold, and this causes a particular, I don't want to say crisis, but an issue for them, because the grants that had been available that many organizations have relied upon year after year, some of those are more narrow in scope as far as what they can do with those funds. This is a more, this has a more broad use. So with these funds, and Paul, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. They can pay salaries. They could complete capital improvement projects of their own.
We've done
could go to
capital improvement
training.
projects, and we welcome capital improvement projects because of the narrow description in the statute about what we have to use it for. There's, and I talked to the mayor about this earlier today, that oddly, on the drug treatment programs, they have money. They have money, because you'd think they'd come in here, we'll take everything you've got. But they have money. I had the same experience. I'm on the opioid recovery committee, and I figured they'd come in for that too. And they don't. We have the money. We don't need to apply. Okay,
So
fine.
is there anything else we can use this money to benefit our community?
I'll give you a past example. When they were constructing the inpatient drug treatment facility for New Beginnings, we contributed $50,000 to that. And then we also had a contribution, they needed a travel van. We made that contribution too. It was about $26,000. So we welcome those kind of projects because it actually helps, because the narrow description of the services it meets, a lot of times with, and I'm not disparaging any of these organizations, but they do a lot more than what's described in the statute, and we have to apply it to that. We don't want to sit on the money. If you know, great, if there's a capital improvement project, if Shara's out there and you've got another capital improvement project for us, be sure and let us know, because we want the funds to be awarded.
A great conversation, I'm glad.
So do we
glad
need
we're having
to make it known? Do we need to do a better job of making it known these funds are available for use?
I don't know that it's ever been marketed. I mean, I probably see 99% of what is on the city's Facebook and social media pages. I don't know. I don't know that it's being marketed, or necessarily that it needs to be marketed. I think there's probably a small group of organizations that would be eligible based on the services that they provide. That being said, Paul, I believe that if there's an organization that has a more broad scope of services that they provide, that they could apply for specific projects that meet this criteria. Is that correct?
And these folks do.
Right.
These folks do, so others could do the same.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I don't have, these, what they're gonna use the funds for is fine if we wanna give extra money out of this pot, but I think it would be wise for us to put out there what the guidelines are, how they've been used in the past, and see if we get any more entities come to the table, so that fits the bill with what we're trying to do this year.
Yeah.
And they have to submit an application to be approved for this money, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, and I had staff email us the complete application packets of the 4 organizations that applied for funds. You all received that via email. It was late in the day, but it was at some point earlier today. And they submit financial statements and narratives regarding describing their staffing and that they're adhering with state law, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not nothing. The applications are substantial.
Mayor, what would you like to do?
So I am, and I can make the motion. Hold on, I have to find my numbers.
We'll make you look good in the minutes. You don't have to get fancy with your motion.
Okay, so I move to approve the distribution of special alcohol fund awards for 2026 in double the amounts requested by the 4 organizations listed,
And that leaves a balance of about how much?
$199,000.
I'd second that.
Richardson,
Yes.
Garza,
Yes.
Bast,
Yes.
Megers.
Yes.
Goss.
Yes. Yes, and we're gonna take a 5-minute recess. Thank you. Next item, please.
Item 8D, budget discussion.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Enrico Villegas, City Manager. There's no formal presentation with this other than to get a temperature check from you all on any questions that you may have for myself, Angela, and there is one position that I wanted to highlight that I had intended to talk about it last meeting, but with everything that we had discussed, I just kind of shifted it to this one. But there's a proposal to share a position with the local Chamber of Commerce, and it would be an economic development position. And part of this discussion, it was something that I had brought on with the Chamber, at least as a discussion piece. And to kind of give a breakdown as to what the intention of the role is, at least on the city's part, that there's definitely a gap, if you will, in some of the services that we provide on the economic development side of the house. So one would be getting more involved. And so this position could help fulfill that piece on going out to conferences and, for lack of better words, trying to win work for the community. So Katie is currently doing that, but this would also be an additional resource for an extended reach. And then finally, when it comes to evaluating incentive packages, whether they're IRBs, property tax abatements, et cetera, there's at least a best practice, if you will, in terms of a threshold. If the city makes a certain level of investment, and if the city were to win that company, that is it above the threshold of what that investment was. And so say if it's here, it's kind of like, okay, well, that's a no-brainer, it makes sense. But say if you're right at it to where you kind of break even on the investment versus what they'll bring to the community, it's more of a judgment call at that point. But if it's below, then it's like, well, this incentive package doesn't work, or maybe we need to reevaluate things altogether. So in an instance where, say if the level of investments that the city is willing to make, say if it was instead of 100% property tax abatement, say through negotiations you say, okay, to get above the threshold where it makes sense, maybe it's a 70% property tax abatement, and then you can jump up. And so that way there's at least ways to responsibly and reasonably navigate these. And so that can come in the form of cost-benefit analysis or a but-for analysis, reviewing and scrutinizing pro formas, all those things. So there's a little bit more science behind what we say yes to and what we're saying no to. Objectively, we'd want to say yes to everyone, but then it's like, how do we do that? And so that's at least my goal for what this position could be. And I've ran that by Deborah, and she fully supports that, does agree that that is a gap. And so there are certain things that she would like for the position to also do. Really, the job description kind of exists in both of our heads. We haven't put anything down yet, just to kind of do a shakeout to see how these conversations go. But in addition to the work that this position could do, in all of the progressive conversations that the Chamber and I have had, we've shifted Market Hutch back to the city. That's falling under strategic growth. And then bringing the downtown position back to the city, that would also fall under strategic growth. So we've been kind of bouncing back and forth and trying to properly right-size the services that the city can provide and then the services that the Chamber can provide. And for this position to live at the Chamber, it seems more fitting. If they're going to be kind of living on the road from time to time, we would just, the scrutiny that city staff, like constantly going on road trips and all those things, would just not look good. And so if we're at the Chamber, it's more palatable because they kind of do that already for other things. And so I wanted to talk about the position there. And then, again, any other questions that you may have, just budget generally, I can certainly try and answer. So, but any questions on the position with the Chamber?
Would this person serve like as ex officio, or could this person serve as ex officio on the chamber board, would be my question. Because if we're paying half of their salary, I want that person to have 100% knowledge of everything that the chamber is doing, so that our staff can be tapped to weigh in on infrastructure needs and requests and that sort of thing. And it feels like ex officio would be an appropriate.
I think that's perfect to bake into the job description.
Would you, Scott, I know you have chamber board experience. Do you feel like that would be an appropriate place for that position to hold?
Yeah, I think so, as long as it doesn't fall under a conflict of interest into a situation with a, potential company coming here, I guess would be the only thing, which I wouldn't see. I mean, I think it would be fine because they're just city staff. I mean, they'd almost, a lot of that stuff you learn about an executive even too, so.
And they'd be under NDA on a lot of things.
It'd probably be a discussion to have with them, but I think that would be, I mean.
I would want to encourage that to be baked into the job description. I don't think it's a hill I'm willing to die on in regards to this position, though.
No, I think that's a really good thought. And so it's like anything like that, there's certain things that like I have a need for, but that makes total sense too. So, yeah, no, I keep them coming if you have.
What would be the potential start date of the position? January 1? If filled.
Yeah, probably.
What's the approximate salary of this type of position?
I gotta discuss that with Deborah. We wanted to kind of flesh out whether or not the organization support it, and then after that we can kind of dig into the particulars.
Sorry, what departments did you say those would fall under?
So this position, since it would be split, would just basically report to me and Deborah. But the downtown position would report to strategic growth, and the Market Hutch services would fall under strategic growth.
So Market Hutch was previously funded at $90,000 a year. Was that via MOU or was that via an ordinance? Do you know, Angela?
My understanding is that's just general like requests that were made, and so if we need X, and then we just supplied that amount.
Okay. So essentially that $90K or whatever it was per year that was being attributed to Market Hutch is now being kept in-house. I served on the Market Hutch committee for, I don't know, maybe a year. I don't think they only meet a few times a year anyway, if I recall, but it feels like the majority of that money was spent on ad buys for seasonal content. The goal of the committee was simply to increase sales tax revenue, retail sales tax.
Now, get me straight on this. Whatever the salary is, we have it with the chamber, or what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you speak to the benefits of the chamber versus the benefits of the city, and which one has a more robust benefits package?
I can speak that it would be cheaper if the city did not pay the benefits, and that if it lived at the chamber. I don't know how robust theirs is, quite honest with you. Deborah would be here, but she has a conflict.
That's fine. But regardless, they would only be able to tap into the chambers, either one, and that would be in the job description.
Correct.
It feels like you guys would be leaning towards them being on the chambers benefits package.
Yeah, that's correct.
So did you say they would be housed in City of Hutchinson offices?
No, they would be housed out of the chamber.
They would still be in the chamber, okay.
So basically, if you think of like how the downtown position was functioning, that the position lived over there, that's how this position would function too. But with the dual split there of keeping the city apprised, i.e. keeping me apprised of what's going on, what incentives are going on, what makes sense to say yes to, those types of things. Because we've gotten really good now at knowing our numbers on the utility side of what the threshold for water we can say yes to. So if a really big appealing company says we want to move to Hutch and we're bringing 10,000 workers, but we need 12 million gallons of water a day, we know we can't supply that. And so that's something we can say no to because we have a threshold, and the same logic would hopefully be applied to like the incentives of like how do we make sense with what's being asked.
You know, I really think that's a benefit to our city, just because there's so many things. When I was on the other side of the chamber, just so many things that if we could collaborate together more on, I think we could have got more things across the finish line. So
And early.
yes, I think it's a great thing to join those together.
Yeah, I'm definitely trying to like tackle that sliver you just mentioned of like how do we make that more efficient. So
Yeah, I think it makes it easier to identify what's the stuff that's worth chasing and at what effort level. For me, this makes sense. Specifically the economic development position. I have a question about the downtown development position. So
Yes.
that one would be a city employee and would be housed in city offices.
that is correct.
Okay. And that one does not have an opportunity for a cost share on salary from the chamber.
It would just be born from the city.
Okay, so that one, for a little bit of history, that role had lived at the chamber for the past 2 years. Prior to that, it was Mr. Downtown, Mr. Sightnader, who was a city employee, and he held that role for how long? I don't know, 16
days.
years?
Yeah.
Many years,
Here and
yeah.
there,
And this isn't a knock on the previous person who held the position with the chamber, but I see a lot of value in bringing that position back to town and to being a city employee, to work closely with staff and to prioritize downtown development.
Thank you.
So I give green light for both.
Thank you.
Any additional remarks from council on this?
I would agree with that, and we would basically be just shifting money that we were giving to the chamber for the downtown position.
I don't think anybody at home heard you. Can you speak up? Sorry.
That position was funded by the city at the chamber. Now it will be, the money will remain the same, so.
Yeah, and just funny, I guess, it was not intended to be a wash, but it kind of is looking like that, so.
I view this person, and not that you in government gauge a person based on like what they're taking in, but like my sales background is kicking in, and that this person's going to pay for themselves, and then some by winning projects and increasing sales tax and whatnot. So I think these are both good.
And all three of those positions are currently filled at the chamber, correct?
The downtown position, it's vacant.
It's vacant, okay.
Yep.
It is vacant with no intention of being filled at the chamber.
I gotcha, okay.
You know, and I think part of just while we're talking economic development, at some of like our bigger projects that we're pursuing, I was just very impressed with the chambers, how thoughtful they were and everything. And I just had conversations like, how can I help like support like that piece? You know, what do you need? And so there was just a lot more deliberative discussions on that. But I was very impressed. And so I think especially with having a lot of our key department head positions being filled, a lot of other key staff positions being filled, such as the city engineer, now we're able to provide a lot more of those services. And so I think definitely this position is more like steroids at that point of what we can do for the community. And so I definitely appreciate the feedback on the position. Any discussions on the city's budget on the presentation from 2 weeks ago? If not, just certainly email me as we move along if something pops up after the fact. So
There is something that I'd like to mention in regards to the sales tax and how it's being framed in the community, which is that essentially, as we as a council and staff discuss the sales tax or the potential of going after a sales tax, all we're doing is we're putting it out for a vote. And then the voters will decide. And this process is all set by state statute. So we'll define the projects that would be attributed to the sales tax, but ultimately it's not us deciding whether or not we have a sales tax. We're deciding, will it be voted upon by the residents? At that point, whether it's approved or not, we have the opportunity to adjust the projects, adjust the tax requested, put it up for another vote, or kill it for forever or for the time being. So I just hope that the community can kind of reframe this, that it's not council supporting a sales tax per se, it's that we support this going out for a vote. And the other thing is, looking at the big picture, there are conversations in the Reno County community of the potential of the county going after a county-wide sales tax. And the sentiment that the city's not being a team player if we go after our own, specifically if we go after our own first, because that would tank the possibility of a county-wide sales tax passing. But the fact of the matter is that the sales tax generated in Hutch by a county-wide sales tax exceeds the value that would be received by the city of Hutch. Therefore, we're essentially going to be, if a county-wide sales tax passes, the city of Hutch would be funding projects in the outlying communities, which I think we all love Reno County, but we'd be funding that from our residents and from our tourists with no return on investment, if you will, to the residents of Hutchinson. So I don't believe that indirectly or directly the city should be funding county projects, if you will. So I support the council putting a sales tax out for a vote as we start to flesh out what those projects look like and what would be the appropriate level for that sales tax, because I think it's important to let the voters decide.
You know, and one thing too, just to clear my conscience, I was given a hard time when I had shared that we would rely on salary savings to kind of make up for any of the holes that we have. I was sharing that knowing that like that's not a good strategy, but we were doing that, and we want to fix it, right? That's kind of the whole intention of here's where we've been, but here's where we want to be. And I think that where we want to be part was like lost. And so it just, we're trying to relook at everything. And so there's and I am glad that you touched on the county one. I do think that both could coexist, and they're serving different populations, and we're not trying to be a bad partner or not a team player. We have our own needs. We're a very complex, unique organization. And I think in particular cases, I was reading some case studies, some from Texas, and I think there was a municipality in Colorado that recently filed bankruptcy. It's very real for cities, and I certainly don't want that for us. So I don't think there's anything wrong in this particular case of trying to avoid that. So.
And something that I emailed you and asked you to run some numbers on was if we could omit groceries from our sales tax, or maybe I talked to you on the phone about it. Yeah, as the state has made moves to lower and then eventually go to zero on sales tax on groceries, if we're going to have a 1% sales tax, I would not want it to be on groceries, and that's something that we'll talk about in the future as we bring up the issue again. But that would be my goal of if we move forward with the sales tax, that we omit grocery as an item.
I will say that we definitely have to like run through the scenarios again on what that looks like.
But the bottom line is we're still working on it.
Yep.
And it's still, as far as you can say, is we have to keep working and keep going on it. So when's the deadline we have to give them an answer?
July 20th, so for us, it's July 15th, so the next council meeting.
Are we going to have a meeting to, before July 15th? Mr. Brown, it costs us money to make it go to a vote, don't it? Or not? It does.
Well, it depends on when you do it. If it's a special election, yes, there's a cost to that. If it's combined with either a primary or a general election, no, there's no additional cost.
So we can't do it during the new election or the new officers coming to the, we have to, but basically, we're going to have a special election because July 15th is not very far away, correct?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I think the intention here would be, because if we pass the 2 mil increase, that shores up this 2026's budget problem. But for future, we would look at wanting to do the sales tax, and the sales tax we
Gotcha.
could do next year.
Gotcha.
So
That's two different things.
yeah, and there's kind of a lot riding on November already, and then trying to like
I
bake
got
more
you.
into it November of this year.
Gotcha.
So next year's more of a possibility there.
See, me being on the council, I'm getting smarter and smarter.
No, I understood what you were saying.
Yeah, I got you. All right.
So if the sales tax, say, it goes to a vote, gets passed, and then I know that's a kind of a trade-off for the stormwater runoff fee.
Right.
So if the sales tax gets passed, when would the stormwater runoff fee come off then of basically your water bill?
Angela, do you have an idea on that one?
You want me to answer that?
Sure.
It depends on when we repeal it.
So something that I emailed to Mr. Villegas was to show us in the event that let's say we have a special election next spring and the sales tax does not pass, I asked him to have in their back pocket what amendments we would need to make to the ordinance, the stormwater ordinance, in order to allow flexibility in the funds, not necessarily a change to the funds or an increase or whatnot, but simply amending the ordinance that would allow us to use it for other projects as well. Then we could kill it and adopt a new one?
Absolutely
So we
not.
can't amend the ordinance as it is now?
It is a utility fee. It is a utility. It must be used for that utility. You cannot use it for other purposes.
Yeah, we've run into that on our other enterprise funds, like our water and sewer. It has to be water or it has to be sewer. They can't cross-pollinate with each other and have water pay for sewer stuff.
Can you create a new type of fund that would be more all-inclusive to cover more than just the stormwater runoff if the sales tax doesn't pass?
It has to do with what we're authorized to collect as revenue. We're very limited as a city. The state gives us property tax, sales tax, franchise fees. The utility fees we collect, water, sewer, and the stormwater, we're able to do that because it's specific to a utility and the providing of that utility. If you're going to want something general in nature, you're going to have to fit it into a sales tax or property tax.
Could you repeal the stormwater runoff and go, hey, we're gonna get away from that, but here's the new one that's gonna be, it would be stormwater and, so we can do more with that money than just the stormwater underneath the
Right, and we're not saying to bake in roads, but to bake in, like, for instance, at the example that we were given of, we repair a pipe and there's a road that was on top of it and now we need to repair the road. And we only dug up that road because we repaired the stormwater. Is that not allowable in a utility fee?
Well, no. Because you're essentially creating a revenue and a tax that you're not entitled to collect.
Okay.
So basically our hands are tied then with that stormwater runoff, so we basically need to pass a sales tax to be able to do all of
Right.
that. Okay.
Sales
Right,
tax or
that's
nothing.
correct. Because if it's not specifically authorized by the state of Kansas, then we can't collect it. When we get into the other areas, and that's where challenges have come to municipalities, when you impose certain fees, and they look at that closely and say, well, wait a minute, this is really a tax, because now you collect it, now you use it for multiple purposes, that's a tax, and you're not authorized to collect it in that manner. You only have the taxes that we allow you to collect.
That answers my email then.
And going forward, if the sales tax would pass, a 3/4 or 1 cent sales tax, we would then lower property taxes, because that is the equivalent of 8 to 10 mills. I assume we would lower, well, obviously, you wouldn't pay the stormwater utility fee on your
It
bill.
would certainly be a goal. So for a lot of other municipalities that have instituted the same type of sales tax, there's definitely a trend where they were either able to keep it flat or start lowering it. And so for a lot of other communities, they've lowered it 3-4 mil, and everything seems fine. So that would certainly be the goal for this, is how we can, if we can shift away from property taxes, what we can then do with the mill.
Right, and I mean, I know that's the goal. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to get it on public record a little
Yeah.
bit, so.
And the cost for a special election, a regular election, which is in-person voting, is $27,400. There is the option of doing a mail-in ballot, which essentially a ballot is mailed to every eligible voter. That costs significantly more, which is $64,400. If you tack this onto an existing election, there is no expense. It's one of those things that we have in, is county in the spring of 26? I have this written down somewhere in my office. I think they're in the fall. Anybody? County?
Yeah, I think I'm with you, Stacy.
Okay.
I think it's in the fall.
Okay, county is in the fall, so.
There might be a
if
They took away
primary.
our spring elections.
That's right, okay. So it's one of those things that you would essentially, the only guaranteed thing is that there would be a November election. You can't guarantee that there would be a primary, because you can't say that what would trigger it. So the $0 cost would be next November, 2026, to put this on the general ballot, which would be countywide races.
Another note on the budget, we recently received the agreement from the Grace Harbor Park.
Oh, yes.
And so I kind of understood we don't want to move forward with that. I just want to double check before I respond. No, we're not going to move forward with that anymore for the Grace Harbor Park.
What do you mean we received an agreement?
So Paul, can you talk about it?
It was the lease with the Salvation Army for the property that the park would be placed upon.
And it's been in a holding pattern for as long as I've been here plus. And so we finally received the lease agreement. Paul notified me last week on that.
I mean, part of my objection to that item was that we didn't have a lease agreement, and so it was really easy to say no when we don't have that. Now that we have it, I'm not saying it's back on the table necessarily, but it changes the consideration. It's still a very expensive project. Does it have, like, are we required to respond within a certain period of time, or?
No, it's been signed by the Salvation
Okay.
Army. It has not been approved by the council.
Okay.
I'm not ready to move forward with that.
And along with that, it has one of the provisions that also says and starts a clock that once we sign the lease, we're supposed to be putting the park and constructing it within 5 years. So council, if you're not ready to proceed and commit to building a park, now is the time to not approve the lease.
And so if we don't approve the lease, there's nothing stopping the Salvation Army from constructing their own park on that land.
It's
Because
theirs.
it's their property and they could build a private park if they wanted to.
So do you need a motion or something to say that we don't, we do? I say we don't agree with that. It's $500,000. That's a lot of money. All right.
Yep, it was 500.
Okay. I agree with, I'm not to approve it.
That's fine, council. You don't have to take any formal vote. I simply won't bring to the lease to the governing body for approval.
All right.
That's me and Garza.
Yeah.
You guys kind
I
of
said,
on hold on this for now, or what?
yeah, I said no. I don't want to move forward with that project. in
I don't want to
particular.
move forward with it.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's all I had.
So knowing that the 15th is our final budget discussions, what homework do you need us to do as a council?
I think none at this point, other than just if you get a last minute question or a resident calls you and you're not sure what the answer is, just shoot me an email or something. I try to be responsive as possible. Some of the emails require a little bit more homework than others, but I try to be as responsive as I can.
I know we send you a lot of emails. So looking at the CIP and the MRF, are we trying to reduce those to a particular dollar figure, or how are we moving forward on CIP and MRF?
No, I think we're fairly stable on that unless there's anything that you have questions on or would like to remove or shift a year or whatever. I mean, that's certainly at your discretion.
Council, any remarks on specific CIP or MRF projects or items?
Not right now.
All right.
Okay, I lost my agenda again, so next item, please.
Report of city officials.
Thank you. Mr. Garza, you are first.
Yes. Actually, I'd like to talk about this. Did you guys notice the point on this? I noticed that when it's coming towards me. The point? Did you guys see that? In the box?
Yes.
That worried me for a minute. But, ma'am, could you take a picture of all of us showing the citizens that people do like us?
That was just 5 people.
Well, people like us.
Yeah, it was just a few.
And our workers like us. So, I mean, we get together and we stand out here, or we can hold them right here, I don't care, because we have proof.
We can take it after.
We'll take it after, but take a picture of that. I would appreciate that. Hey, Popeye's Chicken, are they coming or leaving?
Negative.
I don't know if
all the guards,
I hear mixed results on whether or not they're coming.
the guards at the prison want to know.
Yeah.
Has a Popeyes franchise applied for any permits?
None that I'm aware of.
I will tell you that I asked Raju that question 2.5 hours ago, or however long ago it was, and the answer was no.
Is there anything else going in that corner in its place?
Yes.
Anything that he can share with us?
Possibly some kind of automotive thing. Didn't quite understand what it was. Upscale tires or something.
So,
I didn't.
So what you're telling me, I can tell the guards at the prison the Popeyes aren't coming, right? Right?
I would say you don't know what's going on yet, because we don't know what's going on yet.
Right. But the guy that owns the land, his buddy is not going to put a Popeyes on his land.
Okay.
Can he put it somewhere else? Because I really wanted some.
I'm in 100% agreement.
Okay. Other thing I got, the homeless. You notice the homeless over there, 11th and K61. We had people camped out there by our controller, and they had a picnic table out there. Not a table, but they had picnics and blankets and everything. And I'm having a lot of calls on the homeless.
Are they on private property?
What?
Are they on private property?
They're on our property. So I don't know if we can do anything. They're right there by our traffic controller, or right there, right on our domain, per se. Can we do anything about it? Can we ask them to leave? I don't know if we have anything,
They can be trespassed.
right?
True.
Yep.
If they're
What?
actually on city property.
They're
Okay.
trespassing?
They can be.
They could be. If you're going to be on city property, you have to have our permission.
Well, now there's a tote full of trash there as of noon today.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see people today, but.
Oh, they were there.
But Steve, I'm glad you brought that up. I got a call today at 11:30 a.m.
Mhm.
from somebody complaining about Avenue A Park.
Mhm.
And that goes right along with the other 3 or 4 calls I got last week. Enrico, I, and the chief met about trying to fix the problem, and here we are with the problem, unable to fix it because of our Constitution. And I don't know what the answer is. I would love to have a conversation and try to figure it out. We've been having conversations for 3.5 years with a group of people. And it did help last year when a daytime shelter was opened at the Noel Lodge. It created a sense of belonging, accountability, all those things for those people that wanted to be a part and wanted to try to better themselves, and be accountable. For whatever reason, there seems to be a whole lot more folks in Avenue A Park and at 11th and K61, and for a time at 30th and K61. I don't have the answers, Steve, and I know that the police chief doesn't. I know that we've talked about 2 things: getting rid of the bushes on the south side of Avenue A Park there. It just kind of gives extra cover, and the bushes are overgrown.
And the trees.
And possibly eliminating the plug-ins there, or putting them on.
So something interesting that I saw in a different town was that some plugins are covered with locks, and that when you reserve a building or you reserve a gazebo, for instance, you would get a key to the plug-in to the outlets. That's one more thing for park staff to take on, but that's a potential solution.
Number one, I don't think it's fair for a citizen who's got the radio walking down the street, want to go to the park, sit on the chair there, and they shouldn't be able to have a receptacle that they can plug into. And if we block them up, then the whole idea for a park is gone. But I understand that, I don't know, would removing the receptacles, I don't know if that would help. They're there to sleep at night.
It was just a suggestion
Yeah.
that came to me
Yeah.
that I thought what might be an easy solution, because part of the reason they're there is they've got electricity.
Yeah.
They can heat up water, they can charge phones,
Yeah.
they can do whatever
Yeah.
they do. And you know, the problem for me is not necessarily the folks, but it's all the stuff that is carried in there. And the trash can's full, like 100% of the time. And there's no way anybody else can use those picnic tables.
Right.
It's the same people all the time. And then the call I got today was very specific. Hey, my grandkids, they're not going to that water park anymore. They're just not. And we just think it's sad that we have a nice water park, and there was yelling and screaming going on yesterday, and you need to do something about it, city council member. And Paul, chief, help me do something about it. I don't know what to do.
So I would recommend for the folks who are at K61 and 11th, HPD can go and trespass them. They are on city property without permission. If they are on private property, what we can do is we can ask the property owner if they would like HPD to trespass them and remove them. That's not always available because you have to have the property owner's permission. Is that correct, Chief? Thank you. He said yes. So when you're running into an area like Walmart, for instance, the permission level is varied. It's not as easy as knocking on someone's door and saying, hey, do you want this person removed? So it's a little more difficult. We cannot outlaw panhandling. Trust me, I've sent multiple emails to Mr. Brown about this. That is a protected First Amendment constitutional right. We do have disorderly conduct, and we have hours in the park. Those are all tools that HPD has for enforcement, and I am sure that they use them all, including checking for warrants, etc. A lot of this is that it has to be seen when it's reported. And people move on. So by the time you get a call, they're not there if HPD shows up 5 minutes later or however much later, especially if they're doing something and they think people called them in.
I think somewhere, some committee or something, I hate to make more committees, but it is a problem. Our citizens don't have to deal with the trash and all that other stuff. We have to sit down and talk about this. We go through this every year.
And
We've been doing that for 3.5 years, Steve, and it's the sheriff, it's the police chief, it is New Beginnings, it is United Way. It is a group of a whole bunch of people with a whole bunch of data, and the problem is it's not homeless people necessarily. Most people have a place to go lay their head at night. It is the mentally ill people, the people that struggle with substance abuse. It's not just the homeless. It's just not a one size fits all, and it's so frustrating I'm frustrated. I'm not upset with you. I think we had some good discussions and some ideas, Chief, and maybe that will help. But
I would think I'd bring it up. Maybe we can think of something. But
I was going to bring it up, so
it's a problem. I have nothing else, Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Richardson.
I hope everyone attends the parade for 4th of July if they can. There's going to be a lot of activities. Be safe. I can count on 10 fingers how many times I've done fireworks safely. I'd like to do that again next year. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Fast.
Happy 4th, and appreciate the work that the Community Foundation has been working on housing. I appreciate staff as usual. I appreciate this. Good grief. You know, we're trying to make this the best job in town, and I think we're maybe getting there. Thanks for the acknowledgement. I really appreciate it. That's all I have.
Mr. Meggers?
Well, I do have to jump on that too. I really appreciate that coming from staff. That's a great thing. And you know, the great thing is too, I like stopping out in the field when they're actually working and talk to them. It's really cool to see them, what they're doing, what they're working on. Like I stopped the other day, they were putting in a new fire hydrant. I was like, well, I've never really seen this. I don't understand how it works. So I stopped and checked it out and talked to them for a little bit. It's really good to see our staff out there just
working
for our community. And
bring them Gatorade.
Need to do that too. And then, Chief, I wanted to bring you up for 2 seconds on burn permits. I've had a couple reach out about burn permits. I know what the comment's going to be, but I just want you to make it vocalized so everybody can hear it.
Approximately a year and a half ago, approximately a year and a half ago, the city and with the fire department's recommendation, decided to take away the burn permit process in the city of Hutchinson and allow only recreational fires in the city with specific requirements, so many feet away from a combustible building, wood pile, stuff like that. I don't have the data right in front of me, but we were in the hundreds of calls per year of fences catching on fire in the city, houses catching on fire from grass fires, people burning couches in the backyard, to chairs, to picnic tables, to you name it. We've seen it all. And I think during my presentation, I showed you one where we almost had a very big environmental catastrophe here in town. With that being said here, obviously, when with the no burning right now, and I get it with different sized property lots and stuff like that, but I'm a prime example. I had a tree come through on this last storm right through my garage roof. And it took me 3 trailers and 3 truckloads to run to the dump with it, chainsawing everything up like that. I get that part of it, but just the open burning up in the city, and then it's like, what size pile do they have? How big of, I mean, some of these stumps and stuff burn for months that we see out in the rural areas, and it cause our brush fires. And I think for the most part, we're on a good plan as far as our numbers have gone totally down as far as our responses to fires in the city that way. I think it's a good thing, but I do understand it does create a headache when we do have some wind damage storm come through the town. And I'm not sure how you pick and choose if we open up burning, what that process, we'd have to have pretty much everybody out inspecting properties and making sure everything was safe again. So I personally would rather see sites set up in town again for people to drop off sites. And I really think if you look at the last storm here, I live up in the northeast part of town off of Halstead, and my whole block area, it really got hammered up there compared to a lot of the rest of the city. Everybody had big stuff down in my neighborhood all the way around from Dillon Avenue to Hilltop to all that type of stuff. And everybody up there was asking me, well, hey, when are we going to open the drop-off site and stuff like that? But it wasn't like that throughout the entire city. You know, it just affected the northeast part of town up that way. And so that's, you know, them are the options that I think we need to look at going forward. Is there something we can do for a section of the city to help out instead of the entire city maybe to make things work out better in the future?
Yeah. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I mean, I talked to Cecil too about getting drops around town, and you know, he kind of looked at it and said, no, it's not really viable at this storm like it has been in previous storms. And you know, I know it's frustrating for homeowners that have a bigger property that can go, well, instead of taking 10 loads to the dump, I can burn it, but I can't get a fire permit. So I mean, and it's all for the safety of our community and their neighbors. So I mean, that's just what we have to think about more than anything. So.
And obviously we're green right now, but understand that we live in a very unique place here in and around Hutch. And we have a lot of things that we do when we do our mitigation work around here to prevent fires coming into Hutch and stuff like that. So this has just been a great addition to us reducing the chances of any catastrophe in town here.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Thank you. And to touch on your remarks here, I think that brings a unique perspective, Chief. Thank you for coming up and speaking. To me, it feels like that lowers the threshold that we use to justify whether or not we have a drop site or multiple drop sites. Because if the goal is to reduce what people are potentially storing because they don't want to or can't make it to the dump, even though maybe the storm was concentrated in one area, et cetera. So Cecil, just something to keep in mind for the future, that it is the long-term benefit is that you're going to have fewer people who have logs stored or fire fuel essentially on their property. So last week I had the opportunity to speak to the HHRVC group. This is the Holiday Rambler Recreational Vehicle Club rally. So they brought in 48 RV enthusiasts to our community, and I want to say a heartfelt thanks to the organizers. I know they put in countless hours of planning and preparation. Also, thank you to the State Fair team who provided the accommodations, and the local businesses who provided raffle gifts, discounts, and hospitality to the attendees. So that just one event had 48 campers, 4 stayed in hotels, and 3 were Airbnbs. They stayed for, I believe, give or take, some stayed for 7 to 9 days. But I bring this up because in my remarks to that group, one thing that I mentioned that was that anytime I go somewhere, I take a little bit of that place with me. This past weekend, we went camping to Humboldt, Kansas, which was a really just a phenomenal, very small town. We went there to bike. It's a little bit bigger than Nickerson, Kansas. And just the amount of investment and care that has been put into this small town, it was evident. And the thing that stood out most to me was the second floor living accommodations and rental units. And as we're talking about, the Community Foundation has weighed in, the city and county have funded a housing study. This feels like a piece that we're not making progress on as a city. Talking to building code, they'll say fire code needs changed. Fire experts, marshals, and chiefs will tell us, well, building code also needs changed. So my goal is that in the next 3 months, we can bring all of the players to the table to take apart our policy and put it back together again with something that works, that will encourage downtown second story living or Airbnbs or what have you. We're also missing out on grant funding and different opportunities, retail and transient guest tax fees that could be coming into the city. So I'll meet with staff offline to discuss this in more detail.
Mayor, I want you to know you'll have my full support with any movement in a positive direction. It is, I've tried, and maybe you can get it done. And I will be right there beside you.
Thank you. The other thing is smoking in parks. This is actually has been banned since 2018 via administrative regulation. I spoke with Justin Combs, Parks and Facilities Director today about this, and the conversation stemmed around that this really falls under social enforcement, and that he admitted we could do a better job with signage. So he's committed to exploring more places that we could have the no smoking, no vaping, no tobacco, all of that signs posted in gazebos and parks and just everywhere that people are congregating on city property. This isn't something that has a fee or a ticket to it. It is strictly something that it's just a ban. While those signs are being considered, Justin, I would like you to consider posting hours of operation in all of our parks. I've noticed that those are, if they ever did exist, they don't now. So I think that would also help people understand when they can and can't be in parks. And then I talked about the sales tax. I feel like there was something else, but I'm forgetting what it was. I didn't put it in my notes. So that is it, and I think we'll get home before the streetlights come on. Mr. Villegas, any remarks?
Yeah, a few things. So Kathy Sexton had assigned everyone homework. So just as a reminder, if you've already gotten that done, you can give it to staff. We can scan it and then email it to her. But I think she needs that by the 4th. So just a friendly reminder on that. Welcome any and all feedback. And then I've also gotten calls on the homelessness issue as well. And, you know, the thing with homelessness, I'm certainly not an expert, but, you know, you have really two kinds where you're temporarily homeless, whether it's just through a bad divorce or you lost your job. And temporary is like 6 months or less. And then it's the chronic homelessness where it's 6 months or longer. And it's usually that 6 months or longer is where you start getting the other social problems and then how you tackle that. And so I did meet with some of our partners, and I asked them kind of directly on the chronic homelessness and what are some of the solutions there. But it was shared with me, certainly not in all cases, but it was told to them, well, I want to live this way. Leave me alone. So when you get those types of comments, like, what do you do? So I think we can certainly have, I don't know, if like a study session on what are ways that as partners we can all regroup on how we can move forward with this item, because I certainly don't want it to linger either.
Before we do a study session, I would encourage you or staff and council also to gauge the community and find a committee that they believe is responsible for this and is already doing the work. There are already multiple committees in town that are working on this, and I don't believe that putting together a new committee is going to make any progress because we would be starting from scratch, whereas
No, I
we
agree.
can capitalize on the work of other committees. We can support the work of other committees just by lending them our
No, I agree. As part of the study session, I would want to invite all the people that are actually doing the work so they can share with the public at large, here's what we are doing. So that was my intent there. Because I had my eyes opened when they said, oh, we're doing this, this, and this. Oh, that's great. Does anyone else know about that? So anyway, I had my eyes opened. And so that was that. And then I was going to call up Cecil to provide an update.
About mosquito dunks?
I have gotten a lot of calls on mosquitoes.
Good evening again. Quick update. We have all the concrete poured for the 3 locations of schools where the school zone lights, flashing lights are going to be. The first 2 are already up on 17th. The signs are being made now, and the other 4 places should be up in the, I'm going to say, next 2 to 3 weeks, depending on weather and any other events that come up that pull staff away. But all of them will be up and in place before school starts. So I just wanted an update on that. And then we're going to get with Jessica and get some pictures of them and get that out for the public to see what they look like before they're actually turned on. So, and then just wanted to make sure if you guys had any questions on those.
Can you list those 3 schools?
So it's the ones that are already up now. We're talking Grandview.
Graber.
Graber,
Is that
that's
it?
it.
Sorry.
I was kept doing that one. HMS 7, HMS 8. So those are the ones that are already set up and ready to go. So.
One final comment, and thank you, Cecil. I also very much appreciate this. I had no idea what they were going to say. So I'm like, Cecil, what did you do? Anyway, it's very touching, and I want to say that all the support that you show me, I try to pay that forward with our staff. And I think that is representative of what we just received. And actually, Mary had shared a nice comment with me as well, that she goes, you have a really good team. Everyone just seems to get along and enjoy each other. And it is a testament to the work that we've done, whether it's building roads or kind of rebuilding the health of the organization. So anyway, I just want to say thank you, and thank you to the staff for this. It's really nice.
But we approve. They like us. Some city employees do.
Looking for a motion to adjourn.
No executive session.
Oh, we are not having executive session. Sorry.
Then I would move to adjourn.
Second.
Richardson.
Yes.
Garza.
Oh, yes.
Fast.
Yes.
Magers.
Yes.
Gauss.
Yes.